I was wiping a ring of dried coffee off my desk when my phone buzzed with a calendar reminder I didn't remember setting. 9 a.m. Meeting, estate documents. Location, conference room. B. I stared at it for a second, then looked at the wall clock. It was 8:42. Rain tapped softly against the window of my office, steady and patient, like Portland in late fall always was. I run a small architecture studio downtown. We design clean, durable buildings, the kind that look quiet from the outside, but are complicated once you get close. That morning, everything felt normal. The hum of the printer, the faint smell of tracing paper and fresh pencil shavings, a client email open on my screen, waiting for a reply. Then my assistant knocked and stepped in without her usual pause. "Your sister is here," she said. "And 4 attorneys." I didn't ask why. I already knew. 3 days earlier, my grandfather, Walter, had died. I took a slow breath, stood up, and straightened the stack of drawings on my desk like I was clearing space for something heavy. When I walked into conference room B, my sister Dana was already seated at the far end of the table like she owned it. She didn't stand. She didn't smile. Her nails clicked softly as she tapped them against the wood, one slow beat at a time. 4 lawyers sat around her, their briefcases open. Documents spread across the table in neat piles, like they'd arranged the whole thing before I even arrived. Dana looked up at me, eyes cold and sure. "Sign the waiver," she said, like she was ordering lunch. "Or we go to court. You're not even really family." The room went quiet in that way office rooms do when everyone is waiting to see what kind of person you are. I stayed standing for a moment. I knew Dana expected some kind of reaction, a protest, a plea, something emotional she could frame as weakness. Instead, I pulled out the chair closest to me and sat down. I was 36 then. I'd been adopted when I was 8. Walter had brought me into the family with the kind of stubborn kindness that didn't ask for permission. Dana never forgave him for it. Not openly, not in a way that anyone called cruelty. She did it through little comments, the kind that sound harmless until you realize they always point the same direction. One of her attorneys leaned forward. He had silver hair and the practiced expression of a man who spoke gently while holding a knife. "Ms. Hart," he said, using Dana's married name, "is offering you a simple path forward. Contesting the will is expensive, but she's willing to avoid that if you acknowledge the natural order of inheritance." The phrase landed like something rehearsed. Natural order, like love and loyalty were biology. I looked at the papers. The waiver was thorough. It would sign away any claim I had to Walter's estate. It would leave Dana as the sole beneficiary of what everyone believed was his entire wealth: the lake house outside Oswego, the vintage car collection, his domestic investment accounts. A number floated through my mind because Dana had repeated it to anyone who'd listen. 5 million. It was a lot of money, enough to make people polite, enough to make them careless. I folded my hands on the table and let my eyes move from page to page without rushing. I could feel Dana's impatience like heat. The room smelled faintly of leather and expensive cologne. Someone had brought rain in on their coat, and the damp wool scent mixed with the coffee the assistant had set out. Dana watched me. "Don't pretend you're confused," she said. "Grandpa felt sorry for you, that's all. But the courts won't. Blood is blood." I didn't correct her. I didn't argue. Instead, I stood and walked to the small counter where the firm kept a kettle and a few mugs for clients. The kettle was stainless steel, scratched on one side from years of use. I filled it, set it on, and clicked it on. The sound was small, ordinary. "Would anyone like tea?" I asked, like it was any other meeting. "I have Earl Grey. My grandfather used to bring it back from London." Dana's jaw tightened. "This isn't a social visit," she said. I nodded as if she'd simply stated a preference. Then I placed a few tea bags on a saucer and set out cups. My hands stayed steady. I didn't do it to irritate her. I did it because routine kept me calm, and because I didn't want my body to show what I didn't feel ready to speak. Walter had taught me tea the way he taught me everything else, quietly. No performance, just consistency. When I was 16 and angry at the world, he'd still put the kettle on. When I was 23 and exhausted from school, he'd still put the kettle on. When I started my firm and doubted myself, he'd still put the kettle on. He believed small habits could hold a person together. When the kettle clicked off, I poured the water, watched the steam rise, and brought the tray back to the table. I sat down again and offered the cups. None of the attorneys reached for them, but I could see one of them glance at Dana, like he wasn't sure whether it was allowed. Dana didn't touch hers. "So," I said calmly, "you want everything finalized quickly. You want the estate settled without complications." Her posture shifted, just slightly. She took that as surrender. The air in her shoulders loosened. "That's right," she said. "We're done dragging this out." I looked at the waiver again, then met the silver-haired attorney's eyes. "I understand," I said. "I'll make sure everything is handled tomorrow morning." Dana exhaled, almost relieved, like she'd won something that had always belonged to her. One of the younger attorneys opened his pen, ready for me to sign right then. But Dana lifted a hand and stopped him. "No," she said. "If she's going to do it, she can do it properly. Tomorrow, with the executor, witnesses, the full process." It sounded strategic, but it also sounded like she wanted to enjoy the night, like she wanted time to tell people she'd handled it. I nodded once. "Tomorrow," I repeated. Dana stood, gathered her purse, and looked at me like she was inspecting a room she'd just bought. "I knew you'd come to your senses," she said. Then she turned and walked out, her attorneys following, their paper stacks neatly returned to their briefcases. When the door closed, the conference room fell into a quiet that felt almost physical. I didn't move for a moment. I looked at the untouched tea sitting in front of Dana's empty chair. The steam had faded. The surface was still, like it was waiting for something. On my phone, another notification popped up. Not a calendar reminder this time. A message from a contact I hadn't heard from in almost a year. J. Crawford, London. It was only 2 words. Tomorrow, 8:15. I set my phone face down. Then I sat there in the quiet for a long minute, listening to the rain against the window and thinking about everything my sister didn't know, and how carefully my grandfather had planned for her to find out. Then I waited. I stayed in the conference room after they left, mostly because I didn't want to perform relief in front of my staff. My assistant passed by the glass wall once, slowed, then kept walking. She didn't knock. She didn't ask questions. She'd worked with me long enough to know I preferred quiet after something sharp. When I finally stood, the tea tray was still there. I carried it back to the counter, rinsed the cups, and dried them with a paper towel that tore along the edge. Small, ordinary movements. The kind that keep your mind from running away with itself. Back in my office, I closed out of client emails. I turned my desk lamp on even though it wasn't dark yet. The warm light made the room feel smaller, steadier. I opened the message again. Tomorrow, 8:15. That was it. No explanation. But I already understood what it meant. Walter had a way of preparing people without announcing he was preparing them. He didn't like speeches. He liked systems. If he wanted something done, he didn't argue. He set up the steps so the outcome became the only sensible ending. I had learned that from him, long before money ever came into it. I was adopted at 8, after a stretch of foster placements that blurred together in my memory like the same room repeated with different wallpaper. Walter had been my mother's father. On paper, that made him a relative, but it didn't make him obligated. He still chose me. Dana used to say it like a joke at family gatherings. Light tone, the kind that made other people laugh even when they weren't sure why. "You're his charity project," she'd whisper when no one else could hear. Or if she was feeling more generous, he just has a soft spot for strays. I never fought her on it, not because it was true, but because arguing with Dana always fed her. She was happiest when she could pull emotion out of people like a thread. Walter didn't like that about her. He didn't say it, not at first. He tried to love her through it. He excused things. He paid for things. He believed time might mature her. For years, Dana saw him twice a month, usually when she needed something. I saw him every week, sometimes twice, even when I didn't need anything at all. It started in college. I was studying architecture at the University of Oregon, commuting and working part-time in a small drafting office. Walter called one afternoon and asked if I wanted to meet for coffee. Not dinner, not a formal family thing, just coffee. We met at a quiet place near the river, the kind with chairs that squeak when you lean back. He arrived early and had already found a table by a window. He held his mug in both hands like the warmth mattered. He didn't ask about my grades right away. He asked what I was working on. I told him about a studio project, a public library concept focused on daylight and airflow. I was nervous, talking too fast, the way people do when they're not sure they're allowed to be interesting. He listened, eyes steady, not pretending. When I mentioned how zoning and transit affected who could actually use a building, he nodded once, like I'd opened the right door. Most people see buildings as objects, he said. You see them as decisions. That sentence stayed with me, not because it was flattering, but because it was accurate. It was the first time anyone in my family had spoken to me like I was an adult with a mind worth engaging. After that, we kept meeting. Usually on Sunday mornings. A simple routine, coffee, a walk if the weather allowed, and sometimes a short stop by his house. Walter's home always smelled like paper and cedar. He kept old travel books stacked on side tables. There were framed photos of places I'd never been. A street corner in London, a waterfront in Barcelona, a skyline that looked like Singapore. At first, I thought he was just reminiscing. A retired man remembering the parts of life that had felt larger. Then he started asking me what I thought about those cities, not as vacation spots, as living systems. He'd tap a photo with his finger and say, "If you owned a building there, what would you want it to do?" It wasn't a test. It was how he communicated. He liked ideas. He liked patterns. He liked to see how people processed information. Dana was usually present at holidays when these conversations came up. She would glance at her phone, roll her eyes, and lean toward someone at the table to whisper about something else. "She loves boring stuff," she'd say loudly enough for it to be heard. "She's like a little accountant." Walter would catch my eye across the table, and there would be a pause in him that looked like disappointment held back by politeness. The first time I noticed the difference clearly was at Dana's birthday dinner 2 years ago. Dana insisted on a private room at an expensive restaurant downtown. She invited friends I barely knew, people with bright teeth and quick laughs who treated Walter like he was part of the decor. When the bill came, Dana didn't look at it. She slid it across the table toward Walter with 2 fingers, like a casual habit. "Thanks," she said. "You're the best." Walter paid. He always did. But his face changed for a moment, only a moment, and then it smoothed out again. Later, in the parking garage, I walked with him to his car. The concrete was damp, reflecting the overhead lights. The air smelled like exhaust and rain. He put his hand on the roof of the car and stood there, quiet. "She never asks how I'm doing," he said finally. I didn't answer right away. I didn't want to pile on. I didn't want to turn it into gossip. He glanced at me, like he was checking whether I'd tell him to stop. "She assumes the money is endless," he continued. "And she assumes I am too." That night, I drove him home because his hands had started to shake slightly when he was tired. He didn't like admitting it. He didn't like being helped. But he accepted it from me the way some people accept a warm coat without comment. In his study, he poured 2 small glasses of water and sat down at his desk. The desk was heavy and old, scarred with use, the surface covered in neat stacks of paper. He pulled out a folder. "I want you to look at something," he said. Inside were documents I'd never seen before. Not just domestic paperwork, not just the usual accounts. These were deeds and trust structures with letterheads from places I recognized from his photographs: London, Barcelona, Singapore. I remember sitting very still, my fingers resting lightly on the paper, afraid to smudge something I wasn't supposed to touch. This can't be all yours," I said. He gave a small shrug, like the number itself wasn't the point. "The house, the cars, the visible accounts," he said. "That's what Dana thinks I am." He leaned back slightly. I wanted to see who would care about the rest, not the money, the responsibility. Over the following months, our meetings shifted, still quiet, still normal on the surface, but the subjects became more specific, not just cities as ideas, properties as commitments, maintenance schedules, tenant agreements, tax structures, long-term planning. He didn't hand me power, he handed me process. And slowly, I realized he wasn't just talking to me because he was lonely. He was teaching me because he was deciding. 6 months before he died, he called me and asked me to come by in the evening. His voice was steady, but it carried that tone he used when something mattered. When I arrived, his study was already prepared. Documents lined up, a laptop open on the desk, a cup of tea cooling beside it. He didn't waste time. "I need you to understand something about Dana," he said. Then he slid a second folder toward me. It was thicker than the first. I opened it and saw printed screenshots of text messages and emails dated over the past year. Most of them were from Dana. Short, demanding, casual, money for a trip, money for a car, money to fix an emergency, which turned out to be a credit card limit. Not once did she ask how he was feeling. Not once did she ask if he needed anything. Walter watched me read, his face calm in a way that told me he'd already grieved this. "She sent one last week," he said. I turned the page and saw it. The language was almost careless, like ordering something delivered. At the bottom, no love, no thank you. Just her name. Walter's eyes stayed on the desk. "She doesn't mean to be cruel," he said, "but she doesn't know how to see people when they aren't useful." I swallowed once, careful with my breathing. He tapped the laptop with one finger. "And I have someone on video," he added, "from London." He didn't open the call yet. He just let that detail sit in the room, like a door that would open when it was time. I remember the rain that night too, how it hit the window in soft bursts, and how the house felt like it was holding its breath. Walter looked up at me then, and his voice lowered. "I've made decisions," he said, "and I've documented them." On my desk now, 3 days after his funeral, I could still feel the weight of that folder in my hands. I reached for my phone again and typed a reply to the London contact. Simple, controlled. "Understood. I'll be there." Then I opened my safe, pulled out the envelope Walter had given me months earlier, and set it on my desk. I didn't open it yet. I just placed my palm on top of it for a moment, like grounding myself. Outside, the rain kept tapping against the glass. Inside, I started organizing what I would need for the morning, step by step. And when I was finished, I turned off my desk lamp, locked the office, and walked out into the damp Portland evening with my collar up and my mind quiet. Tomorrow was going to be early, and it was going to change everything. Then I waited. I woke up before my alarm, the way you do when your body decides the day matters. The apartment was quiet. The heater clicked on once, then settled. I made coffee without turning on the overhead lights, just the small lamp over the counter. The sky outside was still dark, the street below glossy with rain. I ate a piece of toast standing up, not because I was anxious, but because I didn't want to sit and think too much. Sitting invites memory. Movement keeps things simple. By 7:20, I was in my car, driving toward downtown. The windshield wipers kept a steady rhythm. Portland looked softened by the drizzle, buildings blurred at the edges, the river a dull strip of steel. At 7:58, I parked in the garage beneath Crawford and Klein. It wasn't an architecture firm. It wasn't even a local estate office in the usual sense. It was the kind of place people used when money had layers. The lobby was marble and quiet. The security guard nodded without asking questions. I'd been there before, once with Walter, though we'd entered through a side door that avoided the main reception desk. He preferred not to make announcements. The elevator opened on the 23rd floor. A receptionist behind a curved desk looked up and smiled politely. A small sign on the wall read, "Private Client Services." "Ms. Lane?" she asked. I nodded. My last name wasn't Lane, but I didn't correct her. Walter had set things up under an old family name he sometimes used for travel bookings. It was one of those details that would have seemed strange to anyone else, but to him it was normal. A small layer, a small buffer. "You can go right in," she said. James Crawford's office had the kind of view that always felt slightly unreal. The river bent below, and the buildings along the waterfront looked like clean shapes cut from gray paper. Crawford was already at the conference table. He was in his 60s, dressed plainly, no jewelry, no unnecessary warmth. He stood as I walked in and gave a nod that was respectful, but not intimate. "You came early," he said. "I like time," I replied. He glanced at the folder I carried. "Good." His assistant brought coffee and water, then stepped out without lingering. The door closed softly. The room settled into that careful silence legal offices have, where every sound feels like it might be recorded. Crawford opened a binder and flipped to a page marked with a pale yellow tab. "Before your sister arrives," he said, "I want to confirm 2 things." He didn't ask if I was okay. He didn't ask how I was grieving. He didn't do comfort. Walter had chosen him for that exact reason. "First," Crawford continued, "you understand that today is not a debate. We will follow the structure Walter created. We will answer questions, provide documentation, and stay within procedure." "I understand," I said. "Second," he added, "you understand why he chose the timing." I looked out at the river for a moment. He wanted her to show up confident. Crawford's mouth tightened slightly, almost a smile, but not quite. "Yes." At 8:12, my phone buzzed once. A message from my assistant at the firm. "You okay?" I typed back only, "In a meeting. We'll call later." Then I put the phone face down. At 8:59, the receptionist called through the intercom. "Ms. Hart and counsel are here." Crawford didn't move quickly. He didn't rush to greet them like a host. He stayed seated, hands folded lightly on the binder, like a judge waiting for people to take their places. The door opened, and Dana walked in first. She looked rested, styled, confident. A beige trench coat over a dress that still had the crispness of something new. She walked as if she'd already won. Behind her came the same silver-haired attorney from my office, plus 3 others. One younger associate carried a laptop bag and a thick folder. Another had a legal pad already open. Dana looked at me and did something that almost resembled kindness. "I'm glad you did the sensible thing," she said. I nodded, neutral. "Good morning." We took our seats. Dana at one end, me closer to Crawford. The attorneys arranged themselves in a line beside Dana, like a shield. Crawford opened his binder. "Let's begin with clarity," he said. Walter Mitchell had 2 categories of assets: domestic probate assets and international holdings governed by separate legal structures. Dana's lead attorney leaned forward. "We understand the domestic estate. We've reviewed the preliminary disclosures. Approximately $5 million in total value." Dana's eyes flicked to me, then back to Crawford, like she wanted to watch him confirm it. Crawford nodded. "Correct. The lake property, the vehicle collection, and domestic portfolios total approximately $5 million at the time of death." Dana's shoulders loosened. "And," Crawford continued, without changing his tone. That represents about 20% of Walter's total wealth. The silence that followed felt clean, like someone had shut off a machine. Dana blinked once. "Excuse me?" Crawford didn't repeat himself louder. He simply turned a page. Over the past 15 years, Walter built an international real estate portfolio and related investment structures, properties and development interests in London, Barcelona, and Singapore. One of Dana's attorneys cleared his throat. If those assets exist, they should still be subject to the will and inheritance statutes. Crawford looked at him calmly. They would be, if they were part of the probate estate. Dana's confidence tightened into something sharper. "What are you saying?" Crawford slid a single sheet across the table toward Dana, not a stack. One page, a summary. At the bottom, a number. Dana stared at it, then looked up. "That can't be right." Crawford kept his hands on the binder. "The current estimated value is in excess of $20 million. Dana's lead attorney reached for the page. His eyes moved quickly, scanning, then narrowing. "This summary references trusts and corporate entities," he said. "We would need full documentation." "Of course," Crawford said. He turned another page, then another, and slid a thicker set of documents toward them. "These assets," he said, "were transferred 3 years ago to Ms. Lane." Dana's head snapped up. "Who?" Crawford's eyes didn't move from the page. "Ms. Lane is the name used on the trust documents. The beneficiary is your sister." Dana's face changed in a slow sequence. Confusion first, then disbelief, then something that looked like embarrassment fighting with anger. "That's not possible," she said. "He would never." Crawford lifted his gaze, steady. "He did." Dana's lead attorney sat back slightly, as if the chair had suddenly become less supportive. "Transfers of that magnitude," he said carefully, "can be challenged. Undue influence, mental capacity, coercion." Crawford nodded once, like he'd expected the list. He reached into a second binder and pulled out a tabbed section labeled Competency. "Walter anticipated that," he said. "He completed psychiatric evaluations, medical assessments, and video confirmations of intent. He consulted multiple independent attorneys across jurisdictions. Every transfer is documented." He slid another packet across. Dana's hands were still on the summary page. Her fingers curled around the edges hard enough to bend it. "This is insane," she said quietly, voice thinning. "You're telling me she gets everything and I get… what? Scraps?" Crawford didn't react to the word scraps. "The domestic probate assets pass to you," he said, "minus taxes and administrative fees." Dana's attorney spoke again, slower now. "And the international holdings are outside the estate entirely." "That is correct," Crawford said. Dana looked at me like I'd changed shape in front of her. I didn't smile. I didn't lift my chin. I didn't do anything that would look like celebration. Walter had taught me that the strongest position is the one that doesn't require performance. Dana's voice rose slightly, not a shout, but the start of one. "You knew," she said. "You knew this, and you let me walk in here." "I told you I'd handle everything properly," I said, calm. "And I am." Crawford didn't interrupt. He let the words sit where they landed. Dana's attorneys began flipping through pages. Their pens moved faster. Their faces went more neutral, which is what lawyers do when they don't want to show surprise. Crawford tapped one tab with his finger. "There is an additional component," he said. Dana's head turned toward him, sharply. Crawford opened a small evidence sleeve and removed a USB drive, placing it on the table like it was just another document. "Walter maintained records of relevant communications," he said, "as context for his decision-making." Dana's attorney frowned. "Recordings?" Crawford nodded. "Audio, some video?" Dana's mouth opened slightly. "He recorded me?" "He documented interactions," Crawford corrected. "For his files. He was advised to." Dana stared at the drive like it might move on its own. Crawford's tone stayed even. Before we proceed further, I want to confirm whether you intend to claim incapacity or undue influence. If so, we will enter that into the record and provide the supporting materials. Dana swallowed. Her eyes were glossy with something she didn't want anyone to see. Her lead attorney leaned toward her and spoke in a low voice I couldn't fully hear, but I caught a few words. Jurisdictions, costs, 3 countries. Dana didn't answer him immediately. She kept staring at the USB drive. I watched her hands. They were trembling now, just slightly, the way people shake when their certainty breaks, but their pride won't let them admit it. Crawford waited. He didn't rush her. Silence, in that room, was not awkward. It was an instrument. Dana finally lifted her head and looked at him, voice tighter. "Play it," she said. "Whatever it is, play it." Crawford nodded once, as if he'd been expecting that decision all along. He reached for his laptop, and as the screen lit up, the rain at the window seemed to get quieter, like the city itself was leaning in to listen. Then I waited. Crawford didn't hit play immediately. He connected the USB drive, opened a folder, and glanced at Dana's lead attorney first. "I'll proceed in a structured order," he said. "If you have objections, state them clearly. If not, we continue." The lead attorney nodded once, the kind of nod that means, "Go ahead, but we're watching." Dana sat very still now. The confidence she'd walked in with had drained out of her posture. Not completely. Pride doesn't vanish that fast. But it had shifted from performance into something defensive. Crawford clicked through files. A list appeared on the screen, each file labeled with a date, a short description, and a note. Dana leaned forward slightly, trying to read it. "Those are private," she said. "They were Walter's records," Crawford replied, "and they are now relevant to the estate plan you are questioning." He paused, then looked at me briefly. It wasn't a request for permission, more like a confirmation that we were proceeding the way Walter intended. My hands stayed folded in my lap. I kept my face neutral. Crawford turned the laptop so the screen angled toward the center of the table. He didn't want anyone claiming they couldn't see. He didn't want anyone claiming bias. "This is not about humiliation," he said. "It is about documentation of intent." Dana's lead attorney cleared his throat. "We reserve our rights." "You can reserve whatever you like," Crawford said calmly, "but procedure still applies." He clicked a file. A small audio player appeared. A timestamp. The date. 2 years earlier, Dana's birthday dinner. Crawford pressed play. Dana's voice came through the speakers, clear and casual. "Come on, Grandpa, it's just money. You can't take it with you, right? I deserve to enjoy life while I'm young." The room did something quiet then. Not a gasp, not shock, just a tightening of attention. On the recording, Walter's voice responded, older, patient. "I understand wanting to enjoy life, Dana, but have you ever thought about where it comes from, or what happens when it's gone?" Dana's laugh followed, sharp enough to sting even years later. "That's your job. I'm not some boring planner like she is." I didn't look at Dana. I didn't need to. I could feel her reaction in the way her breath changed. Crawford paused the audio. "This is context," he said. "Not evidence of wrongdoing, but it reflects the pattern Walter documented." Dana's lead attorney held up a hand. "Audio can be misleading. People say careless things." "Agreed," Crawford said, which is why he recorded more than one instance. He clicked another file, a date 6 months after the first, a different setting. Dana's voice sounded impatient, slightly breathless. "I don't get why you're making this hard. You're rich. I'm your granddaughter. End of story." Walter's voice quieter. "I'm not refusing you because I don't care. I'm refusing you because I'm worried about what this is turning into." Dana's voice again, sharper. "It's turning into you being difficult. Everyone else's grandparents help them. Why are you acting like I'm asking for something strange?" Crawford paused again. Dana's attorney spoke quickly, trying to regain control of the room. We can argue tone all day. That doesn't prove incapacity or undue influence. Crawford nodded, unbothered. Correct. This is not for incapacity. This is for motivation and intent. He slid a page across the table. It was a timeline. Dates of legal consults, names of law firms, jurisdictions, medical assessments, independent counsel statements. I recognized it because I'd seen an earlier version in Walter's study. He'd liked timelines. They made decisions feel like engineering instead of emotion. Dana's attorney scanned the page and his face tightened. This is extensive, he murmured. It was designed to be, Crawford said. Dana's voice broke through, higher than before but still not shouting. You're acting like I'm some villain. No one answered right away. Crawford didn't jump in. He let the silence hold. Dana looked at me then. Her eyes weren't just angry. They were searching, like she needed me to confirm this was a misunderstanding, that I would soften it. I didn't. Not because I wanted her to suffer, because softening would turn it into debate. And Walter had asked for order, not debate. Crawford clicked another file, but this time he didn't play it. He opened a document. Before we continue, he said, I want to state the structure plainly. He looked at Dana and her counsel. Step 1. Domestic probate assets transfer to Dana according to the will. Standard process. Standard disclosures. Dana's lead attorney nodded once. Step 2. International holdings are controlled by trusts and corporate entities already transferred. Those are not part of the probate estate. Dana's attorney's pen hovered over his pad, then moved again. Step 3. If you wish to challenge those transfers, you must file in each relevant jurisdiction, under the governing law of each trust. Dana's lead attorney's face went still. Crawford kept going, even tone. Step 4. Any challenge triggers disclosure. That includes records of decision-making, communications, and competence evaluations. Dana's jaw tightened. And Step 5, Crawford finished. The cost of Step 3 is significant. Dana's attorney spoke carefully, like he was explaining something to a client who didn't want to hear it. Dana, this could mean litigation in multiple countries. It's not like contesting a house deed in Oregon. Dana snapped her gaze at him. So what? We'll fight. Her attorney didn't flinch. With what funding? Dana's face flushed. She glanced down at the domestic asset summary again, the number now feeling smaller to her because it wasn't the biggest number in the room. Crawford reached for a third binder. This one was thinner. He slid it toward Dana with a gentle push. This is Walter's letter to you, he said. He instructed that you receive it today, after you understood the structure. Dana stared at the folder but didn't touch it. What is it? She said, voice tight. A personal explanation, Crawford replied, and a conditional provision. That word landed. Conditional. Dana finally reached out and pulled the folder closer, her fingers stiff. I watched her open it. The paper inside was thick and slightly off-white, the kind Walter preferred. He used the same paper for thank you notes and travel letters. It was one of those small details that always made his handwriting look more deliberate. Dana unfolded the letter. Her eyes moved across the first lines. Her breathing changed, like she'd swallowed something sharp. She didn't read it out loud. She didn't need to. I could see the shift as the words found their place. Dana looked up suddenly. This is cruel, she said. He set this up to embarrass me. Crawford didn't argue. He just waited. Dana's attorney leaned over, trying to see the letter. Dana pulled it back instinctively, like it was private even though she had demanded everything be public a day earlier. I spoke then, softly, because the room had started to tilt toward emotion, and I wanted to anchor it back to reality. He waited for you to care about him, I said. He waited a long time. Dana's eyes went to me again, and for a moment there was something raw in her face. Not just anger, something closer to panic. You think you're better than me, she said. I shook my head. Small movement. I think you treated him like a funding source, I replied. And he documented it. Dana's lead attorney pushed his chair back slightly, the first sign that he was preparing for retreat rather than attack. Mr. Crawford, he said, we need to review these materials privately. We'll need copies. You will receive copies of everything relevant to the probate file, Crawford said, and copies of the international trust documents as permitted under the governance structure. Dana's attorney frowned. As permitted? Crawford nodded. The trusts were designed with discretion. Beneficiary privacy is protected. Dana's face tightened again. Privacy for her. Crawford didn't respond to that. He looked down, clicked another folder on the laptop. This next item, he said, is a video confirmation from Walter. Dana stiffened. A video? Crawford nodded. Recorded with independent counsel present. He explains his decisions, in his own words. Dana's hands curled around the letter, crumpling the edge. Her attorney leaned toward her again, voice low. Dana, if we proceed with a challenge, this will all become part of record. Dana swallowed hard. Her eyes flicked between the laptop and the letter. Then she said, almost like she couldn't stop herself, play the video. Crawford's hand hovered over the trackpad. He looked at Dana, then at her counsel. This is the moment, he said evenly. Once we proceed, you cannot claim you were uninformed. Dana didn't answer. Her jaw was set, eyes bright with something stubborn and frightened. Crawford clicked play. The screen went black for a second. Then Walter's face appeared. Older, thinner than the version most people remembered. But his eyes were clear, focused, calm. He looked directly into the camera like he was speaking to a single person, not a room, and he began to talk. Then I waited. Walter's video didn't look staged. The lighting was simple. A lamp to one side, a neutral wall behind him, no dramatic background. Just his face, steady and unmistakably present. He sat upright in a chair, hands folded loosely in front of him. He wasn't smiling, but he wasn't angry either. He looked like someone who had already done the hard thinking and wasn't interested in repeating it. A small label at the bottom of the video identified the setting and date, 3 years earlier. Independent counsel present. Walter began speaking, calm and clear. If you are watching this, he said, it means my estate plan is being questioned. Dana's hands tightened around the paper in her lap. One of her attorneys leaned forward slightly, as if posture could change what he was hearing. Walter continued. I want to be direct. I am of sound mind. I have been evaluated medically, and I have consulted counsel in more than one jurisdiction. These decisions are mine. He paused briefly and looked down, then back up. I have 2 granddaughters, he said, one by birth and one by choice. The words were simple, not sentimental, not flowery. They landed anyway. Dana's face twitched, like she had been slapped without being touched. Walter went on. For years, I tried to believe that love alone could teach responsibility. I believed time would soften entitlement. I believed patience would be returned with care. His voice stayed even, the kind of evenness that doesn't invite argument. I was wrong. Dana's lead attorney moved his pen quickly, writing something down. His jaw was tight. Walter's gaze remained steady. Dana has had access to my domestic assets. She has been supported well beyond what most people receive. She has never been left without resources. Dana's mouth opened slightly, as if she wanted to interrupt a scream. Walter continued, but there is a difference between being supported and being respected. He looked down again for a moment, then back up. In the final years of my life, there were patterns, requests, demands, anger when money was not immediate. Dana's shoulders rose and fell quickly once, like a small shiver. Walter didn't list details in the video. He didn't need to. The recordings had already spoken. He shifted slightly in the chair. "Rebecca," he said, speaking my name in a way that felt strange in that room, showed up. Not an emotional sentence, just factual. She asked about my health. She asked about my plans. She asked about what would happen after I was gone. She listened when I spoke about the work I built. Dana stared at the screen, eyes unblinking. Her face had gone pale beneath the makeup. Walter's voice remained calm. "I did not transfer my international holdings to punish Dana. I transferred them because I needed my life's work to be stewarded, not consumed." There was a soft sound at the table, like someone shifting in their seat too carefully. Walter paused again. "And I want to address a claim I expect will be made," he said. "That Rebecca manipulated me." Dana's lead attorney looked up sharply. Dana's head tilted as if she couldn't stop listening now. Walter's eyes narrowed slightly, not in anger, but in precision. "Rebecca did not ask for this," he said. "I offered it. I initiated the process. I sought legal advice without either granddaughter present. I asked for medical evaluation. I structured these transfers with independent counsel. This is my decision." He leaned forward slightly, as if closing distance. "If you are considering challenging these transfers," he said, "I urge you to consider what that will cost you." Dana's face tightened. Her lips pressed together hard. Walter continued, still even. "I do not want revenge. I want reality." That sentence, in his voice, felt like a final line drawn on paper. He looked down again, then back up. "And because I do not want Dana destroyed," he said, "I have set a boundary and a provision." Dana's head snapped up. Walter spoke slowly, like he wanted the words to be understood. "There is a separate support trust for Dana. It provides basic living expenses. It is not a reward. It is not a prize. It is a safety net." Dana's eyes widened slightly. One of her attorneys inhaled, quick and controlled. Walter added, "It is conditional. It is activated only if Dana stops litigation and completes a period of service and financial counseling. I have written clear requirements. If those requirements are met, the trust pays monthly. If they are not met, it remains closed." Dana's face flushed, red rising up her neck. That's controlling," she muttered, more to herself than to anyone else. Walter on the screen continued, voice still steady. "This is not control. This is accountability." He paused again. "I hope Dana chooses growth," he said. "I hope she chooses to become someone who can hold wealth without it becoming her identity." His gaze softened slightly at the end, but only slightly. "And I hope Rebecca understands that inheritance is not a victory. It is a responsibility." The video stopped. The screen went dark. For a moment, no one spoke. Even the rain outside felt quieter, or maybe I was just paying attention differently. Dana's lead attorney cleared his throat, but the sound came out rougher than he likely intended. "Mr. Crawford," he said, "we will need to evaluate the enforceability of the conditional trust and the discretionary provisions." Crawford nodded once. "You may evaluate. The structure is already in effect." Dana's voice cut in suddenly, strained. "You recorded me," she said to Crawford, then swung her gaze to me. "You both sat on this like it was some kind of trap." I kept my voice level. "Walter documented his decisions," I said. "He didn't trust vague memories. He trusted records." Dana's breath came fast for a second. She tried to steady it. She looked at her attorneys like she wanted them to fix it with words. Her lead attorney chose his language carefully. "Dana," he said, "a challenge here is not simple. The international entities are outside Oregon probate. The evidence of capacity is extensive. And the video alone—" Dana cut him off, not yelling, but sharp enough to stop him. "So you're telling me to give up?" "I'm telling you," he said, "that the likelihood of success is low and the costs are high." Dana's eyes glistened. She looked down at the letter in her lap, then back at me. "You're enjoying this," she said, voice brittle. I shook my head once. "No," I said. "I'm trying to keep it orderly." Dana's mouth twisted. "Orderly, like you always are, like you're above it." I didn't argue. I didn't need to. Crawford stepped in, calm, a neutral anchor. "We can do this one of two ways," he said. "We proceed with probate for domestic assets and close the meeting, or you declare your intent to challenge the international transfers, and we document that declaration today." Dana's hands trembled slightly as she folded the letter again. She pressed it flat, then crumpled one corner without meaning to. She looked at her counsel. They didn't look back with confidence. They looked back with calculation. Dana swallowed. "What if I don't challenge?" she said, voice lower, quieter now. "And I do the requirements." Crawford's expression didn't soften, but it did become slightly less rigid. "Then the support trust can activate according to the terms Walter set," he said. "Counseling, community service, documentation, compliance." Dana stared at the table, breathing through her nose, like she was trying not to fall apart in front of strangers. Then she looked up again, eyes shining. "And if I challenge?" she said. Crawford answered without emotion. "Then the support trust does not activate, and your attorneys will need retainer funds for litigation in multiple jurisdictions." Dana's lead attorney didn't argue. He simply nodded once, reluctantly, confirming the truth of it. Dana sat back in her chair, and for the first time since she walked into my office the day before, she looked smaller, not physically, just internally, like she had been relying on a story about herself that wasn't holding up anymore. She stared at me again. "You're just going to take it," she said softly. "Everything." I kept my tone even. "I'm going to manage what Walter built," I said, "and I'm going to follow his instructions." Dana's jaw clenched. Her eyes shifted away. Crawford closed the binder with a quiet finality. "We will now finalize the domestic probate schedule," he said, "and we will document Dana's decision regarding challenge or compliance." Dana's attorneys leaned in toward her, forming a tight, whispered circle. I couldn't hear their words clearly, but I could see what was happening. They were explaining reality. Dana's fingers tapped the paper once, twice, then stopped. She lifted her head and spoke, voice thin but controlled. "I need a few minutes," she said. Crawford nodded. "You may step out with counsel. The conference room next door is available." Dana stood, a little unsteady, and left with her attorneys. The door closed behind them. Crawford didn't look at me right away. He flipped to a final tab in the binder, waiting with the same patience he'd used all morning. I stared out at the river. I felt tired, but not shaken. The difference surprised me, because the truth was, the hardest part hadn't been today. The hardest part had been watching Walter slowly accept that one of his granddaughters loved what he could provide more than she loved him. A soft knock came at the door. Crawford's assistant opened it slightly. "They're ready," she said. Crawford looked up. "Then we proceed," he said. And I turned back toward the table, prepared to hear Dana's choice. Then I waited. Dana came back in first, but she didn't walk the same way she had earlier. Her shoulders were tighter. Her eyes looked tired around the edges, like she'd spent 10 minutes arguing with reality and lost. Her attorneys followed, quieter now. The silver-haired one held his legal pad against his chest instead of laying it out like a weapon. Crawford waited until everyone was seated again, then spoke in the same steady tone. "For the record," he said, "we are reconvening at 10:11 a.m. The decision we document today will govern the next steps." Dana stared at the table, then lifted her gaze. "I'm not done," she said, voice controlled but strained. "I still think it's wrong." Crawford nodded once. "You are entitled to your opinion. We are not here to evaluate fairness. We are here to follow the structure Walter created." Dana swallowed. Her lead attorney spoke carefully. My client will not initiate international litigation at this time. Dana's jaw tightened at the phrasing, but she didn't correct him. Crawford turned a page in the binder and slid a short form across the table. Then we document that, he said. This is a declaration of non-challenge for the international structures, effective immediately. Dana stared at the paper for a long moment. Her hand hovered over the pen. It shook slightly, then steadied. She signed. The pen made a faint scratching sound against the paper. It was small, ordinary, the kind of sound that changes lives without announcing itself. Crawford took the form back and placed it in the file. Thank you, he said, not warmly, not coldly, just as a fact. Dana's attorney exhaled like he'd been holding his breath. Crawford continued. Next, the domestic probate assets. The will is straightforward. Dana receives the lake property, the vehicles, and domestic portfolio distributions as outlined. After tax liabilities and administrative costs, preliminary projections put the net value at approximately $4.1 million. Dana flinched at the number. It was still huge, but it sounded smaller now because she'd heard a larger number. Crawford didn't pause for that reaction. He turned to another section. Now, he said, the international holdings remain in the trust structures. Rebecca remains beneficiary and manager by Walter's appointed agreements. He looked at me for a moment. We will proceed with the transition schedule. I nodded. Understood. Dana's eyes darted to me again. Transition schedule, she repeated, like it was offensive. Crawford didn't react. He opened a separate folder labeled Support Trust and slid it toward Dana. This is the conditional trust Walter referenced, he said. It is not activated automatically. It requires compliance. Dana's fingers tightened around the edges of the folder. What kind of compliance? She asked, voice lower now. Crawford's tone stayed neutral. 12 months of documented community service, he said, a financial responsibility program through the institution named here, and monthly check-ins with the trustee. No loans against the trust, no early withdrawals, no litigation activity related to the international structures. Dana's face hardened. So I have to prove I'm worthy. Crawford didn't argue. He simply nodded once. You have to meet the terms. Dana's lead attorney leaned over the folder, scanning. This is legally enforceable, he murmured. Crawford's expression didn't change. Yes. Dana stared at the pages. I could see her eyes moving, calculating. She wasn't reading like someone learning. She was reading like someone searching for a loophole. After a moment, she looked up. And if I don't? She asked. Crawford answered immediately. Then it remains closed, he said. And you live on your domestic inheritance. Dana's mouth tightened again. She looked down, then up, and her voice softened in a way that surprised me. Why would he do this? She asked, not as an accusation this time. More like a question she didn't have a good answer for. Crawford didn't speak for Walter emotionally. He spoke for him in systems. Because he wanted a boundary, he said. And because he didn't want you destroyed. Dana's eyes went glassy, then she blinked hard and looked away. The room stayed quiet for a few seconds. Then Dana said, almost reluctantly, If I do all of it, do I get the money? Crawford nodded. Monthly support payments, not a lump sum, and only while compliance continues. Dana's lead attorney tapped the page with his pen. This is better than litigation, he said quietly, for her ears only. Dana didn't respond. She stared at the trust terms like they were written in a language she didn't want to learn. Crawford closed that folder and shifted to the final section. There is one more matter, he said. Walter asked that you be offered a pathway toward practical involvement, if you chose it. Dana looked up sharply. What does that mean? Crawford turned his laptop slightly and pulled up a document labeled Employment Pathway. "This is not a gift," he said. "It is an opportunity with boundaries." He looked at me. "Rebecca controls whether it proceeds," he said. "And on what terms?" Dana's gaze snapped to my face. For the first time since this started, her expression wasn't pure anger. It was something closer to fear. "You'd never hire me," she said, voice thin. I didn't answer right away. I chose my words carefully because this wasn't a moral moment. It was a logistics moment. Walter had asked for family healing, but he had also insisted on structure, and I trusted his instincts. "There are rules," I said. Dana's eyes stayed on me. I continued, calm and clear. "If you want to learn how the portfolio is managed, you start at entry level," I said. "No access to accounts, no signing authority, no borrowing, no personal expense coverage. You work a job, you earn a salary, you show up." Dana swallowed. "And if I mess up?" she asked. "Then it ends," I said. Cleanly. Crawford nodded once, like that was exactly what Walter wanted. Dana's lead attorney looked relieved, not because he cared about family, but because this created an exit ramp that didn't involve courtrooms. Dana stared at the table, then looked up. "What job?" she asked quietly. I had thought about it the night before, not as a revenge plan, but as a practical placement. "The Barcelona office needs an assistant property coordinator," I said. "It's administrative. It's scheduling, tenant communications, maintenance logs, vendor coordination. It's not glamorous." Dana flinched at the word administrative, but she didn't reject it. She looked down again, breathing slowly. Then she nodded once. "I'll do it," she said. Her voice cracked slightly on the last word, and she cleared her throat and tried again, steadier. "I'll do it, if that's the only way." "It's the structured way," I said. Crawford lifted his pen. "Then we document the agreement," he said. "Conditional support trust pathway and employment onboarding, contingent on compliance and written acceptance of boundaries." Dana's attorney leaned toward her. "Dana," he said quietly, "signing this is you choosing stability." Dana stared at the paper for a moment, then signed. It was slower than the first signature, more deliberate, like she understood this one meant more than pride. Crawford placed the signed documents in the binder and closed it. "That concludes the meeting," he said. "The probate schedule will be sent to council. The international transition schedule will proceed. Any questions must be submitted in writing." Dana stood. She didn't look at me immediately. She gathered her folder, held it against her chest, and paused as if she was deciding whether to speak. Finally, she looked up. Her eyes were wet, but her voice stayed controlled. "I didn't know," she said, "about any of it. I didn't know he thought that way about me." I kept my tone steady. "He tried to show you," I said. "You just didn't like what it required." Dana nodded once, small and stiff. Then she turned and walked out with her attorneys. The door closed behind them. Crawford didn't offer congratulations. He didn't say Walter would be proud. He simply gathered the binders and slid one toward me. "Here are the next steps," he said. He pointed to the page with the transition plan, and his finger moved down the list like a checklist. "London management agreements," he said. "Barcelona site visit scheduling, Singapore banking compliance, annual reporting, tax council coordination." I listened, took notes, asked one or two clarifying questions. It felt like work, real work, the kind you can do when grief is sitting quietly in the background, not demanding attention. At 11:06, I left the building and stepped into the damp air. The rain had thinned to mist. Cars hissed over wet pavement. The city moved like it hadn't noticed my life had shifted. I sat in my car for a moment without starting the engine. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt responsible. I pulled out my phone and opened a blank note. I wrote 3 lines, simple. 1. Secure documents. 2. Call my office. 3. Book flights. Then I put the phone face down, started the car, and drove back toward my studio, the wipers keeping time with my thoughts. Then I waited. That evening, I went back to the studio after everyone had left. The building was quieter than usual. No phones ringing, no keyboards. Just the soft buzz of the exit sign and the distant sound of traffic below. I turned on the desk lamp in my office and sat down with the binder Crawford had given me. The tabs were clean and labeled: London, Barcelona, Singapore, reporting, compliance, transition. I didn't open everything at once. I didn't need to. I made tea the same way Walter had taught me. Kettle on, cup warmed first, bag in, water poured slowly. I let it steep while I reviewed only the first page of the transition schedule. Then I wrote 3 lists on a legal pad: flights, calls, documents, nothing emotional, just order. When the tea was ready, I took a sip and stared at the rain on the window for a moment. It wasn't heavy anymore, just a fine mist, like the city was settling down. I went through my email and sent 2 short messages. One to my assistant: "I'm okay, thanks for asking. I'll explain tomorrow." One to Crawford: "I reviewed the next steps. I'll start with London agreements and tax council coordination, confirm timing for Barcelona visit." Then I closed my laptop and sat still for a full minute. I thought about Dana in that conference room, reading Walter's letter with her hands shaking. I thought about how quickly confidence can collapse when it's built on assumptions instead of effort. I didn't feel proud. I didn't feel angry. I felt like I'd been handed a responsibility I couldn't afford to take personally. The next weeks moved fast, but not chaotically. More like a steady machine switching gears. I flew to London first. I walked through buildings Walter had owned quietly for years, standing in lobbies that smelled like stone and polished wood. I met people who had known his name as a signature on agreements, not as a grandfather at a family dinner. I listened more than I spoke. I asked about maintenance schedules, tenant retention, insurance, renovation timelines. I kept my face calm and my questions practical. A month after that, I visited Barcelona. The office there was smaller, brighter, and louder, with windows open to street sounds. The team had already prepared a folder for Dana's role: vendor contacts, repair request logs, tenant response templates, schedule coordination. When Dana arrived, she looked different. Not in a dramatic way, just quieter. She wore plain clothes. Her hair was pulled back without the usual perfection. She introduced herself to the staff with a voice that sounded like it had learned caution. I made the boundaries clear on day 1. "You report to your manager," I told her. "Not to me. You do your hours. You document your work. You don't ask for access you haven't earned." Dana nodded and wrote it down like she didn't trust herself to remember. Some days she did fine. Some days she looked like she wanted to quit. But she stayed. The trustee confirmed her first month of service hours, then the next. She attended the financial program and sent proof without being chased. When the first conditional support payment was approved, it wasn't a celebration. It was a system working the way Walter designed it to work. One night, after a long day in the Barcelona office, I went back to my rental apartment, took my shoes off by the door, and cleaned the kitchen counter with slow, careful strokes. It felt good to do something simple. I washed the mug I'd used for tea, dried it, and put it back in the cabinet. Then I sat at the table and opened an envelope I'd been carrying for weeks. It was a note Walter had written to me, separate from everything legal. Just a few lines. No speeches, no drama, only a reminder that order is how you protect what matters. I folded it back up and placed it in a drawer with my passport and the master schedule for the portfolio. That's where it belonged. A few days later, Crawford forwarded me an email from another family. A different name, a different city, a similar pattern. A relative pressuring an adopted heir to sign something away before the executor meeting, trying to win on intimidation instead of law. I stared at the screen for a while, then saved the message into a folder labeled Future. Because once you've seen how entitlement moves, you start recognizing it early. If you've stayed with me this far, thank you for listening in a calm way. If you want more real stories told like this, please like and subscribe. And tell me in the comments which city you're watching from and what time it is for you right now. 2 popular stories will appear next, and I'll see you there.